Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Double Dribble Show here on Brew Sports Network, the one show that didn't manage to injure its knee 30 seconds into a game this week. As always, I'm Mitch Vomhoff, joined by my good friend Jimmy Carlton. Jimmy, how you doing today?
I'm pretty good. Sorry for your loss with Rudy Gobert.
I told him the story off the air, but I was visiting my parents this weekend for the Easter holiday, and of course my dad and I were watching some basketball, and he had left the room for some reason. And when Rudy Gobert went down, I groaned so loudly that he rushed back into the room, wondering if I had hurt myself in some way. Such was my anguish. But I've managed to get over it enough to come and do our first playoff recap show today. So we're going to start off by looking back a little bit on the games of the weekend and of yesterday evening. Jimmy, I believe you had some takeaways that you would like to share with the people.
I've got three big takeaways.
Big takeaways.
You won't find these anywhere else. First of all, defense, as we've been led to believe and have heard for years, there's a lot more defense in the playoffs. The games slow down, the pace slows down. I think 6 or 7 out of the 6 or 7 teams kept the opponent to under 100 points per game, compared to 2 during the regular season. So that was very disproportionate. These are much better defensive teams. Physical. It was a lot more physical than
we saw.
I guess the games matter. These guys are trying. They care a little bit more. A little MMA sort of scrappiness going on in some of the series. It's fun to see the chippiness. And thankfully, there were some upsets. Unlike during our NCAA tournament first couple rounds, that was all chalk. We got a couple upsets, and we'll talk about those later and which ones we thought were particularly the big ones, and if there are ones that we're going to expect moving forward.
Definitely. Well, I would like to start out today with probably the closest thing we're ever going to get to breaking news here on the Double Dribble Show. As we all know, the Spurs and the Grizzlies played last night. They had a basketball game, and the Grizzlies maybe didn't do the best. But Coach Dave Fizdale of the Grizzlies had some thoughts about why they were not the best. In the spirit of Jim Mora, coaches throwing a little bit of a tantrum, let's say, after their team maybe doesn't perform the best in a high pressure situation.
David Fizdale, he said, not a numbers guy. He self-professed he's not a numbers guy, but it was definitely a words guy yesterday, and he's going to be a numbers guy in terms of his bank account is going to have less numbers in it because he went off on the refs yesterday.
I was actually as we're gonna give this video now, and I honestly
take this for data.
I have a special place in my heart for coaches that go off. So we're gonna share Coach Fizz's thoughts.
First half, we shot 19 shots in the paint, and we had 6 free throws. They shot 11 times in the paint, and they had 23 free throws. I'm not a numbers class, and he just plays the game, but I'm not gonna let them treat us that way. I know Pop's got pedigree, and I'm a young rookie, but they're not going to rook us. That's unacceptable. That was unprofessional. My guys dug in that game and earned the right to be in that game, and they did not even give us a chance. Take that for data.
Obviously, the group you started with in the second half brought you.
So,
what did you see?
I mean, obviously, I feel like this is probably gonna shoot right up there in the ranks of great coach tantrums. Even though Fitz didn't really yell, he wasn't necessarily throwing things. He slammed the pen down at the end. He raised his voice a little bit. But for a self-professed not a numbers guy, he was very interested in numbers yesterday evening, Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, I love when coach is entertaining. Contrast that with Greg Popovich, who did his usual jerk-off routine with the media yesterday, being asked a typically lazy device for a question, for a reporter to ask a question, how important was something, which I hate, and I'm sure coaches get tired of it because it's just a useless way to start a question, but he went off on this reporter of like, I don't know, how important was it, very important, extremely, a 9 out of 10. And then apologized. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be glib. And it's like, Pop, your entire routine with the media for 15 years has been being glib. So if we're staying with the my big takeaways, my news-breaking macro takeaways, this one much more interesting in the press conference afterward than during the game because this is a boring series.
Yeah. So we're just gonna go ahead and get a little bit into the Spurs-Grizzlies matchup, and I'm just gonna preface it by saying, you and I were texting a little bit about this, Jimmy, last night as the game was going on, and I think the majority of our conversation just became, when can I turn this off and go to bed?
Right. You made the smart decision to turn it off when Memphis was first down by 15 or 20 points before they made a comeback to get down by 6 or 7 later and then ultimately lose by 15 or so. I stuck with it to the end. That's on me. That's just a mistake. That's something I have to live with myself and figure out how to grow and improve. The thing with Memphis is like, I tweeted this at the beginning of the game and also in game one. Like, when can they stop being in the playoffs? Can we bar them from the playoffs? They're a good enough regular season team. They play this old-fashioned grit and grind that maybe ostensibly works in the playoffs. But then they get there and they always end up meeting the Spurs at some point. And they just get walloped and it's boring to watch. It's a boring style and they suck. And I'm just done with Memphis in the playoffs. I'm sorry. Yeah, Fizdale has a point in terms of the free throw discrepancy, but you're not fun to watch, and they're scoring 83 points a game is not going to win you basketball games, even if you're if you think you're being dogged by the refs.
Yeah, and I do want to shout out to Patrick, who's hanging out with us, who I think agrees with your general state or your general sensibility that no, the officiating did not lose you the game, Memphis. You scored 82 points in a playoff basketball game. And that's just not enough.
Yeah, you're giving up 100 to the Spurs. Okay. And also, Kawhi. Can we talk about Kawhi? Do you want to talk about Kawhi?
Love it. Yeah. If you want to see, and I mean, this isn't. I'm not going to call it a coming out party because Kawhi's already an MVP or a Finals MVP, Defensive Player of the Year,
Two-time
All-Star,
All-NBA guy,
All NBA. He's got all the medals, the awards. But I think when we are now seeing, here's what Kawhi Leonard will look like in his full form, in his final form. Kawhi Leonard last night put up 37 points, 11 rebounds, a number that hasn't been hit since Tim Duncan in 2008, so almost a decade ago, which was pretty much prime Tim. Well, I mean, Tim Duncan was probably, 30 at that point? So, but still, full prime Tim Duncan, who's, on the short list of great power forwards ever. Mm-hmm. The Spurs have just done their Spurs thing and picked up another future Hall of Famer right where the last one stopped off, and we're starting to see that come around with Kawhi.
Yeah. With Memphis, why is that a team that is not built for the playoffs is my question. They are a slow down, grit and grind with the defense. In the playoffs, the pace comes down and you're supposed to defend first and just sort of every possession is a battle. This is a team that seems to be built for the playoffs, and you know what? They don't have enough talent. And plus, Tony Allen's out. They don't have that defensive leader. Two questions going off Fizz's rant, though.
Yes.
First of all, do we think that's going to energize them? They're going home now, thankfully. And also, he specifically called out in a good way, his point guard, Mike Conley, who's had one technical foul throughout his entire career, maybe even zero.
I believe.
Zero technical
I saw an
fouls
article about
in his
that last
entire career.
week.
And he called out by name Mike Conley as being this classy guy who maybe they need to have an edge. Mm-hmm. So do you think Fizz's rant is going to jump them up, and do you think it does anything to Mike Conley?
I mean, for the $25,000 to $50,000 that Fitz is going to be paying for this particular rant, let's say, I would hope so. And I do think that you're going to see in the next game, you're going to watch the Grizzlies come out, and they are going to play better. I think they'll put up more than 82 points, and they'll be more competitive in their next game. Conley, I think, is the kind of guy who would react well to being called out, not get mad and kind of try to take his ball and go home. I think, Mike Conley certainly played well already. We'll see that continue, but even a good Grizzlies team, I can't see touching the Spurs team.
Good, yeah. Let's just get this one over and done with. I'm hoping for a sweep, and I could care less about this series. Just over and done with.
For sure.
Another one that looks like Cavs offensively are clicking on all cylinders. Defensively, we haven't seen that switch flip that we had heard allegedly was going to happen.
Where are the plans?
Maybe it doesn't matter against the Pacers. And
show us the documents.
With Indiana, it's all Paul George and not a lot else, right?
Yes, correct. I mean, Paul George and his illustrious teammate Monta Ellis, who put up 2 points in about 20 minutes yesterday evening. So, yes, we can all agree that the Pacers need more help. And I saw a lot of conflicting stuff between indie guys, or I should say indie media and kind of national media about some comments that Paul George made.
Yeah, let's talk
after
about
the
that.
game. Let's talk about it. Paul George is maybe not super happy about what's going on, understandably. I mean, he's playing at an all-star, all-NBA level in this series particularly. But, when Jeff Teague and Thad Young are your next best two teammates, you might feel a little bit shortchanged. Do you think the comments that Paul George made have anything to or cast any light on what's going to happen to him after the season or even after next season when he becomes a free agent?
Yeah, I think that obviously, like you said, there's two lenses to view this through. And I don't even know whether it's an Indy versus Cleveland thing. I think it's just what do you think of Paul George is intending to do in his future? Paul George is the best player on that team by leaps and bounds. He doesn't have enough talent on that team to be anything more than a first-round punching bag for the Cavs. He also took most of the season to start playing at the All-NBA level that he now is playing at and has always professed to be that player. My issue, though, is that if you are a leader of the team that is playing in the playoffs right now, I don't think that there was anything positive that is served by his comments after Game 1 when C.J. Miles took the last-second shot because Paul George gave it up. They wanted the ball in Paul George's hands. Their coach called a timeout to draw up a play and give Cleveland a chance to set their defense. Paul George was doubled immediately. It was very well executed. One of the only times Cleveland's done anything efficiently on defense. He gave it up. C.J. Miles has 4 seconds to do something with the ball, gets off a decent shot, and Paul George calls him out afterward for saying, "I need that ball. I have confidence in my guys, but I'm supposed to take the last shot. That was a bad shot." He walked that back a little bit later on, but I don't think those comments do anything for chemistry, for locker room camaraderie, for just having for the other guys on the court having any confidence in being able to be part of the offense. And then last night after Lance Stevenson was basically manhandled by Kevin Love and showed his very Lance Stevenson-like body language and being upset and being a lunatic, Paul George said we need less of that. We need him to be fall in line. That's a little bit more fair enough, but I just think it speaks to Paul George is out the door. I don't think you say this in a playoff series if you think, A, your team is going to be competing to win that series, and B, if you are going to be sticking around with these same guys that you're now calling out in the national media.
Yeah.
It's not a good look either way.
I agree that I understand Paul George's frustration, but at some point you do still have to say, we're in this playoff series together, guys. Like, if it's a motivational tactic, I think he could maybe pick a better one. If it's just frustration, he should maybe tamp that down a little bit because there's nothing the Pacers can do right now to help him personnel-wise. I mean, he's stuck with who he's got.
Yeah.
All right, for our next series, we are going to bring in a guest, a first-timer to the show. Friend of ours, friend of the Brew Sports series, Kyle Laboria is here, and he's going to help us break down the Rockets and Thunder matchup. Kyle, how are you doing today? All right. Well, we can't quite hear Kyle yet, but we are getting on that. So we will be back with that shortly. So obviously the Rockets and the Thunder, it wasn't a super competitive game in their Game 1. Do we have them?
We're good.
All right, Kyle.
Yeah, can you hear me?
There you are. All right, great. Good to have you, buddy.
All
right.
Thanks, Kyle.
We'll get it figured out, right?
It's kind of a rite of passage on our show to not be able to get in touch with our guests. So we really appreciate you hanging in there.
You fought through it.
Rockets Thunder. You said we got you today because you've been paying attention to this series. It's one that I've personally been really excited about because it's Harden, Westbrook, and then I guess there's some other guys playing as well. How much was that Game 1? What did that show you in terms of potential? Obviously, the votes have been cast, but in terms of who is more valuable to their team, what were your main takeaways from that game? That the Rockets just sort of did it dirty with the Thunder.
Well, it just goes to show you that this season, the Oklahoma City Thunder 33-9 when Russell Westbrook goes off for a triple-double. They're 14-26 when he doesn't. He doesn't go off for a triple-double first game of this series, and on top of that, he shoots 6 for 23. 6 for 23. That is not what you want to see out of an MVP.
Numbers.
Yeah. That's a lot of shots and not a lot of scoring. I mean, he gets 22 points off of 6 for 23 shooting, but his efficiency is terrible and his usage rate is through the roof.
What did you see, speaking of efficiency, what impressed you from James Harden in that game one?
What impressed me is he didn't force anything like Westbrook was. His shot wasn't falling early in the game, so he expanded his game in other ways. Get into the lane, kick it out, get your other players involved. Patrick Beverley takes over that game, scores 21 points of his own, and then Harden's shot starts to fall later on in the game. That's what impressed me from Harden the most.
Yeah, the matchup that we've all been talking about and looking forward to, obviously, is that mano-a-mano MVP race matchup of Harden versus Westbrook. But really the one that probably on a more practical level is the one to watch is, like you said, Westbrook versus Beverley. Beverley's offense was a surprise, but his defense just right up in Westbrook's grill and forcing a lot of problems against him was not a surprise. Now, Russell Westbrook today had some comments saying, I never worry about what other guys are doing. It doesn't bother me. He's a good defender, but I don't worry about anybody. I can pretty much do whatever I want to do. What kind of impact do you think that's going to have, those comments and the game one matchup between those two guys, is that going to have on game two between Beverley and Westbrook specifically?
Look, those comments are from an alpha dog who's led his team to the playoffs when no one thought they were going to get there once Kevin Durant leaves. So I expect those comments from him. And he's right. He shouldn't worry about Patrick Beverley, what he needs to do. What Russell Westbrook needs to worry about is the 9 turnovers that he caused in that game. 6 for 23 and 9 turnovers is not a stat line that an alpha dog needs to come out and show. So no, don't worry about Patrick Beverley. You need to worry about not turning over the ball so much. And your plus minus is minus 25. He needs to look at his game first.
All right. Kyle, are there – you feel pretty strongly about Westbrook's play, let's say. Are there adjustments he can make going forward in this series, maybe to get his teammates more involved? Like practically, obviously we've talked about how his supporting cast is maybe not great. Are there adjustments that he can make to – at least make the series more competitive, if not steal a couple of games from Houston?
Well, I think he needs to do what he just keeps doing, and that's lead his team. You're right when you said he didn't get much support from the rest of his team. I mean, 2 other players on that team scoring in double digits. You've got Grant off the bench scoring barely double digits. He's got 10, and Robinson coming in and getting 18. He needs to do what he's doing, but he needs some support. I don't think it falls all on Russell Westbrook. Take care of the ball, take care of your teammates, your shots will come, and I think they can steal one from Houston, but it's going to be at home in Oklahoma City.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm curious, which team do you think actually has more team-wide talent?
Oh, without a doubt, Houston. Up and down 1 through 15, Houston has way more talent on that team.
And they certainly seem to use it better in the system, right? I mean, they've got guys that are a good fit for what they're trying to do, as opposed to 14 guys playing around the Russell Westbrook show.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't have hit it on the head any more. I mean, you look at the starting 5 for the Thunder, that's some talent. But when you start getting into the bench game, there's no contest. Houston's got a far deeper bench.
Definitely. All right. We definitely appreciate your input here, Kyle. Before we let you go, give us a prediction for the series. Where does this end? How many games do we get? I think we know what your outcome is, but
I'm saying 4-1 Rockets. I think Oklahoma City can steal one at home in Oklahoma City, but I don't see them stealing more than a game against the Rockets. Rockets move forward.
How many points is Westbrook scoring in the game that they have to win?
50.
50. All right. Well, I'm
50
looking forward
points,
to
30 rebounds, 20 assists. All right, sounds good, man.
All right.
I think
All right. Well,
Thanks, Kyle.
we appreciate your time, Kyle. Where can the good people find you on the internet?
you can find me at Twitter, at @KLaboria is the best place to find me, interact with me. Looking forward to talking to all you NBA fans.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much. And they'll do it. They'll do it for our illustrious guest. Some great input there. As a reminder, you all are watching the Double Dribble Show here on Brew Sports, here on Facebook, on YouTube, Spreaker.com, the Spreaker app, all these good places. We really appreciate having you here. But we are going to finish out with maybe some quicker hits on the remaining series. We've got a couple games coming up tonight. If you're watching this live on Tuesday, so you can roll right over from us into...
Yeah, it's preview time.
Yes, it is preview time.
Time to make predictions that will become outdated and irrelevant within like a few hours so that we don't get blamed for them whatsoever.
This is going to be the fastest I've ever been proven wrong on a sports take, probably.
All right, let's go out east. We got Boston and Chicago.
Yeah, a surprising game one.
Yeah.
A game one that I was not expecting at all.
Bulls pulled the first one out. I think the underlying story obviously was Isaiah Thomas's the tragic death of his sister. He still played supremely at a sublimely good game. Chicago won that game, and I was wondering if you had if that surprised you.
Yeah, I think it definitely did. I mean, we spoke a little bit last week about how down I am on Chicago's general team building and composition. So to see them kind of rally around, even though obviously we figured Jimmy Butler would be exceptional, but to see them rally and play well enough to take a game one in Boston, I think was definitely a surprise for me.
And I was not as surprised as you were, just because with the way that they were constructed, they were obviously misconstructed, and this was a team that didn't know whether it was tanking, didn't know whether it was trying to win, had nobody that could shoot, and traded away and lost a midseason trade pretty decisively. And yet, when you give me a team that has in the playoffs that has the talent of a Jimmy Butler, who's capable of being the best player in any series.
Yeah.
A Rajon Rondo, who is a former, he's an NBA champion. He's a guy that was the best point guard on NBA on finals teams. Dwayne Wade, obviously a multiple-time champion and All-NBA Hall of Fame guy. You have talent there, and you have guys that I think really step up when the lights are the brightest, and who sort of decide to try when they want to. I'm looking mostly at Rajon Rondo with that, but I think Dwayne Wade is also when he, with his body and how old he is, he sort of decides when he wants to go hard. And the TNT Bulls being a thing, we talked about this on previous episodes. Many people have talked about how they just have this inexplicable winning streak when playing on TNT and national broadcast. I think that just speaks to this ability that they're like, well, I guess we should utilize our talent tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the TNT Bulls was the thing we talked about.
And the other thing with them is
because it is inexplicable.
And the other thing with them is that they have the kryptonite to beat Boston in terms of they are a very good offensive rebounding team, good rebounding team in general. Actually, it's one of the only things they do really well, and Boston is not.
Yeah, definitely. One quick question before we move on for you as our resident media guy. Obviously, there's a lot of coverage of, as you mentioned, Isaiah Thomas's situation with his sister. Very tough time for him. But do you feel like there is not enough, too much, or just the right amount of media coverage on that situation? Obviously, it's a narrative that people will pay attention to, but is it being overexposed?
Yeah, I think there's too much. I think there was too much in this particular instance. Now, it happened the day before the game. It's going to be a storyline. There is a narrative there, and it's a touching one, especially. It's touching in that it's very sad, but it's a poignant storyline, and it obviously played very well. I thought lingering on him with tears in his eyes, obviously extremely. Just tortured and distraught. I don't think we need that. I don't think that's where sports is escape, but not for somebody who's going through what he's going through. I just didn't feel like it was. Isaiah Thomas can grieve to the public on his terms. We don't need a camera in his face and then a lot of talking heads discussing what it means to him to have to lose his sister in such a high-profile situation.
Yeah, I agree. And there's there's a discussion to be had around how the sports media views or the sports media handles situations that happen outside of it. But definitely they could kind of maybe ease up on that a little bit.
All right, I want to move out west for a series that you're watching.
Yeah, I am.
Maybe other people are watching it. I've not.
Sure.
But Clippers Jazz with your boy Rudy Gobert going down a minute into the game.
My large adult son, all of my large adult sons have leg injuries, and it's really killing me here. But yeah, no, I mean, I thought the game one, obviously, that the Jazz won on a buzzer beater. Definitely unexpected, especially when Rudy Gobert went down in the first minute of the game. But that it also tells me that I think the Jazz are a little bit more of a force to be reckoned with than most people are maybe giving them credit for. And depending on how long Gobert is out, obviously it's a tremendous blow to that team. And I don't think you're going to continue getting 20-point games of Joe Johnson at this point in his career to sustain your attack, but. I'm still pegging that. Listen, y'all, if you're not watching Clippers and the Jazz and you can afford to stay up for a late game on the West Coast, that's something you got to see.
Death to the Clippers, death to grit and grind, death to the Western Conference.
Jimmy has very specific playoff hatreds. Let's touch briefly on what was maybe the biggest upset of the weekend, and obviously one that's maybe closest to your heart, Jimmy. Bucks upsetting the Raptors fairly significantly. I mean, this wasn't a game that was necessarily in doubt all that much after the first half.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Bucks were down, or I should say the Raptors were ahead by 5 points at the half. But Bucks ended up winning by a significant margin, and that was pretty surprising. What's your takeaway? Is this a long-term? Is what the Bucks are doing sustainable in the long term, or was this just kind of a shock to an opponent that isn't super familiar with them?
Okay, the Bucks played their best game. The Bucks were their best selves in that game, with Giannis being a beast. The two rookies, Malcolm Brogdon and Thon Maker, both contributing on both ends of the floor. Tony Snell hitting shots. The bench being very useful. They overcame Chris Middleton again, having a poor shooting night.
Yeah.
Having said all that as preamble, I don't know. What they do is that what they're doing on defense is what the Bucks are. They trap really aggressively. They try to get in passing lanes. They went small to the point of they really were just playing small ball as a big team with Giannis and a bunch of guys that have huge wingspans. But Toronto didn't really know how to match up with that, and it was a little slow. I don't know if that's. I think that in Game 1 of a playoff series, a team like the Bucks can steal that game because they are a matchup nightmare. They can beat the best teams in the league. But as the series moves ahead, Game 2, teams make adjustments. The Bucks are less of this sort of like curiosity and more of a team that you can beat and take advantage of and exploit their weaknesses. I look for them to probably get blown out tonight. And I'm a Bucks fan. And then
as the Bucks go, listen, we know the score.
But if you take 1-1 on the road and you come back to Milwaukee, where they're going to be having pep rallies outside the Bradley Center and all sorts of fun stuff. So I don't know if what they're doing is sustainable. I thought they played their best game. It was really exciting, and whatever happens tonight, sort of gravy, right?
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's take it into the home stretch a little bit with a couple of brief thoughts about the Wizards and the Hawks. John Wall decided to show out in his first game of this playoff series.
Yeah, he's Brandon Jennings' MVP pick.
Yeah, well, Brandon Jennings was Brandon Jennings' MVP pick once, but but is this? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about John Wall and his MVP candidacy, but is he making that jump towards being a legitimate MVP candidate and someone who's going to get votes?
He would be if there wasn't already like 4 or 5 guys also having superlative seasons. He was the best player on the court. He was, one of the top 2 or 3 guys in playoff game ones. He overcame the fact that Brad Beal couldn't hit a shot. The rest of his team couldn't hit from outside. He overcame the fact that the Hawks were sort of playing disjointed, hackish basketball, not really trying to play a game. Yeah, he's making a jump. I think he's always had the ability, and now with the bright lights are on, he's got a healthy team around him. Look good.
For sure.
All right, Warriors-Blazers.
We
got our dubs. Some people are picking them to go pretty far in these playoffs.
Yeah, I'd say they're a popular pick. Not an underdog, let's say.
Yeah. A couple things. Kevin Durant is questionable for Game 2. He had a left calf strain.
That's not great.
Steve Kerr said today Durant didn't practice. That's obviously a concern. That's what Kerr said. And we have Dame Lillard and CJ McCollum just shooting the lights out of the ball and tearing it up. We think the Blazers can get one, because I guess that's as sort of intriguing as the series gets, right? Can they steal one?
Probably. I mean, they've got a great atmosphere up in Portland. I think when they go back home for games 3 and 4, there's a pretty good shot that Dame Lillard catches fire. I mean, he was pretty hot in Game 1. But we've seen him take it to another level up in Portland. I could see them winning a real shootout up there if everything breaks right. But I'm also going to say that that's probably about where this whole thing ends for them, right?
Yeah, and I also think I think that they would have a better chance without Nurkic. I mean, Nurkic has a broken leg, or sort of a broken leg. They're trying to get him back. There's questions of whether he could play. Yeah. I think that they're more of a matchup problem for the Warriors if they just rely on the backcourt to give them 60 and are just firing up threes and basically playing a Rocket-style shootout.
Yeah. Yusuf Nurkic is not the missing piece in this series for them. All right. And now and that's going to take us to our wrap-up. I do want to get a couple of thoughts out of you, Jimmy. which we talked about some upsets. But which was the biggest upset? Which was the biggest game one upset for you? Bulls Celtics, Jazz Clippers, or Bucks Raptors?
Bulls Celtics. It's an 8-1. We didn't know we were getting out of the 500 Bulls, and they beat the best team in the East. So that was the biggest upset for me.
All right. Next one, we're just going to keep on going through some rapid hits here. Bucks Raptors are playing game 2 tonight in about 30 minutes after this show, so you can tune into that. Does this series end up extending and going to 6 or 7 games either way?
Yeah, I think it does because the Bucks stole one on the road. You're almost always going to win one back at home, and I would hope that rep in Milwaukee they will. So I think we're looking at a 5 or 6, at least 5, and I would say 6. And I think the Bucks can push it. I think they split these first 4, and then we sort of see who's gonna win the back 3.
Yep, well, definitely. And finally, any sweeps you see coming out? We've got a couple. I mean, obviously it's still wide open, but any sweeps? We have one 1-8 series that could end being a sweep.
Yeah, I mean, the easy one is the Blazers are getting swept. I think that's pretty clear. I could also see the Rockets sweeping the Fighting Westbrooks, even though he's been my MVP pick all along. They just looked like such a better basketball team. It looked like a varsity team playing against a JV, like the freshman team that had like one superstar 14-year-old who's like going to be great, but the rest of the team isn't good enough to make it even relevant.
For sure, yeah. And in addition to that, I got the Grizzlies, despite the pep talk from Fighting Dave Fizdale, not winning any games against the Spurs. I also don't think the Pacers are going to pull anything out against the Cavs. Not anything world shattering, but listen, guys, sorry, try again next year. And that is going to do it for this edition of the Double Dribble Basketball Show. Jimmy, thanks so much for joining me. Where can the good people find you on the internet?
Well, thanks for joining me. On Milwaukee.com.
I'm the host. You joined me.
On Milwaukee.com, I'm the sports editor there. You can find me on Twitter at JimmyCarlton88. And Mitch, where about you?
You can always find me at Mitch Vomhoff on Twitter. And you can find all of our illustrious work here on the Brew Sports Network. Find us at Brew Sports on Facebook, at Brew Sports Net on Twitter. We are on Spreaker, YouTube. You can type Brew Sports into the internet and you'll find our stuff. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. And we will be back next week for another edition of the Double Dribble here on Brew Sports.